Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good weekend, and welcome to Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, where I thought it might be a good idea to take you on a virtual tour of some of the places that I have visited while in the Royal Navy, beginning of course with, well, why not, the spiritual, and these days mostly practical home of the Royal Navy, Portsmouth. We're starting off at the airfield at Lyon-le-Solent, which used to be Navy property. This was HMS Daedalus, a Royal Naval Air Station, until the government did what governments do and sold it off. All in the name of efficiency, of course, because this is a good thing. I mean, we want efficient armed services. Unfortunately, the government's definition of efficiency means armed services that we don't have to spend any money on, which is not quite the same thing as the military definition of efficiency. But in the same efficient vein, the government did get rid of all the Royal Navy's aircraft, so why would you need airfields anyway? And viewed in that respect, yeah, it is incredibly efficient. Yeah, way back, I don't know, well over 10 years ago now, it was when I was still serving, the government, in their infinite wisdom, decided that the Royal Navy's aircraft carriers didn't actually need any interceptors anymore, so they got rid of all of our Sea Harriers. But don't worry, they said, we'll replace them with the F-35 Lightnings. Yeah, but they're not due in service for at least another 10 years. Well, in the meantime, we can use Royal Air Force Harriers. Yeah, but Royal Air Force Harriers are bombers, not fighters. You can't bomb incoming enemy aircraft and missiles. At which point the government said, don't come to us with problems, come to us with solutions. Because that's just what governments do. Anyway, here I am, taken off at last, after eventually finding the parking brake from the former Royal Naval Air Station, HMS Daedalus, which is now merely the Lyon-Solent airfield. Flight Sim 2020, by the way, is an absolutely astonishing piece of software. What they've managed to achieve with this is nothing short of amazing. However, there are some fairly large buts. You are going to need a beast of a PC to run this thing at anything other than a frame rate associated with the slideshow and have it look the way it deserves to look. What you're seeing here is the game being run on an AMD Ryzen 9 9700 XT 12-core processor backed up by 64GB of Corsair 3200 MHz RAM, running off a Samsung Evo M2 SSD with a RTX 2080 Super graphics card. And that kind of machine is producing what you're watching right now, which is running in 4K resolution and is achieving about 30 frames per second. Which is why you're watching this video on YouTube, or Floatplane, thank you, if you are at 30 FPS, because there's no point in rendering it at a higher frame rate, because it's not recorded at that kind of frame rate. If I were to do this over Manhattan, rather than the green fields of the Lyon-Solent and Gosport area, well, speaking of the green fields, down below us is the water purification plant. And if you're driving between Gosport and Fareham, and the wind's in the right direction, holy shit, that thing stinks. But yes, if I was to do this over Manhattan on this machine, I would be lucky to see 20 frames per second. One of the other things that they don't tell you about are the loading times. I would not recommend installing this on anything other than a fast solid-state drive, but they're not that expensive these days. You can pick up a 2TB SSD for around about £150, or whatever that is in your local currency. I would not recommend trying to install and run this game off a mechanical hard drive. Passing over Gosport now. Now what's that below? I'm going to go up and hit the active pause. This is a neat feature. It allows your aircraft, it basically pauses your aircraft in flight while the world carries on moving around it, allowing you to pan and tilt the view around like this. I do apologise for the incorrect heading indicator message that keeps popping up. I've only recently figured out how to get rid of it, but you're going to have to put up with it in this video. I'm not sure exactly where I am, which is kind of alarming because I live here. Oh wait, no, I know where I am now. I've just seen something I recognised. I've got my bearings again. The other alarming thing about Flight Sim 2020 is how long it takes to install the thing, even if you are installing onto an SSD. I got my copy of the game. Well, it's not really a game, it's a simulation from Steam, and I was immediately suspicious when I saw that the install size was only about 551 megabytes. Yeah, that's not the game, that's the game installer. The actual game itself is probably going to require you to download not far short of 100 gigabytes of data, which is pretty nasty, but I have a 200 megabit internet connection. I could do 100 gigabytes of data in about half an hour, or at least I could if I was downloading and installing it via Steam. But once you've downloaded the 500 megabyte installer, it seems to hand over to Microsoft's own servers to download the next 100 gigabytes, and they are shit. It takes forever. I had to leave this thing downloading and installing overnight. Anyway, I've got my bearings back. We're deep in the heart of Gosport, and we're about to fly over what used to be known as HMS Centurion and is now just called Centurion Building. Doesn't deserve the HMS anymore, and this was the Royal Navy's Pain Administration Centre. And we're passing over it right now. And the complex of buildings that you can see below us, just over there to the left, that is HMS Sultan, which is the Royal Navy's mechanical, electrical, and I think now also aeronautical engineering training establishment. And I was based there for quite a while because it also contains the Admiralty Interview Board, which is where I spent my last couple of years in the Royal Navy, assessing the initial potential of candidates who wish to become Royal Navy, Royal Naval Reserve and Royal Marine officers. Going to head down in the direction of Portsmouth, which is on the other side of the Solent estuary over there, and there's still plenty more to see in Gosport. Just trying to find Gosport High Street first, which turned out to be harder than I thought it was going to be, and you'll see why when we get there. Because while this is a pretty damn good representation of Gosport, it's not perfect. You see, it just wouldn't be feasibly practical for Flight Sim 2020 to have accurately mapped the whole surface of the Earth. It kind of has, but not 100% accurately. It uses photogrammetric data from Bing Maps. If you're wondering why not Google Maps, because Microsoft own Bing, so they're not going to use Google Maps. But this does allow Flight Sim 2020 to get a pretty accurate idea of what it is that you're flying over at any given time, and it spools it over the internet, so you do require an active internet connection to play this game, unless you have pre-cached certain areas that you want to fly over in advance. But where it's not quite sure what it's looking at, it fills in the gaps, and it usually fills in the gaps with stock buildings or trees, because that right down there, that broad avenue full of trees, that's Gosport High Street. And trust me, there are no trees on Gosport High Street. So it's pretty good, but it's definitely not perfect. Over there, you can see one of the marinas and the chandler's yard. There's also a microbrewery down there, which is really, really good and does some excellent beer. Pan the view around a little more. There's that incorrect heading indicator again. Like I said, that's to do with your gyro compass. I've figured out since how to disable it. You're just going to have to put up with it for the moment. Looking back over the high street in the distance, you can see a little boating lake which is full of swans. There's a little boathouse there where you can have tea and cakes. It actually looks quite nice from the air. You don't realise what a shithole it is on the ground. Gosport High Street. You know a town's in trouble when most of the shops are second-hand stores and betting shops. Oh, and shops that sell mobile phones. That's pretty much it. Just about everything else is closed down. There used to be a bookshop there. The only bookshop in Gosport. That's gone as well, of course. Right, anyway, let's get back on with it. Oh, I used to live in that tower block over there to the right, by the way, but that was years ago. Anyway, we're not heading straight over to Portsmouth and the naval base just yet. Instead, there's still more to see in Gosport. We are now flying over what used to be known as HMS Dolphin, which was a submarine base. It's not anymore, of course. But after the submarine base was closed down, it became an admin centre for the military medical services. And that building there is where I used to work. I used to look after the pay and administration of all of the naval medical personnel. It was a joint service establishment, Army, Navy and Air Force. All of the naval medical personnel who worked at Royal Hospital Haslar, the Institute of Naval Medicine at Alverstoke, and the Royal Naval, or the Military Medical Unit, at the Queen Alexandria Hospital. That was quite a busy job. And that building right there is the set of the submarine escape training tank. It's full of water. 100 metres down there's an airlock, and they take potential submariners, they throw them out of the airlock and tell them to make it to the surface 100 metres up without dying. And it's something that all potential Royal Navy submariners have to do successfully before they earn their Dolphin badge. Right, still more to see on this side. We're about to fly over what used to be known as Royal Hospital Haslar. It's been shut down, of course, because that's just what governments do, which is a real shame, because that hospital has been in existence for about 400 years. And in the grounds of that hospital, which you can see just below us, there's a 17th century graveyard that still contains the remains of sailors and Royal Marines who died or were injured during the siege of Gibraltar, which took place shortly after Lord Admiral Nelson had seen the French off at the Battle of the Nile. On the way back, he dropped them off at Gibraltar, said, just hold on to this for me until I get back. Came back about 7 months later, and they had held on to it until he got back. The wounded were evacuated and treated here at Haslar, and those who died of their wounds were buried in the grounds. At the top end of the screen there you can see the village of Alverstoke, and it's a very, very fancy neighbourhood. Most of the people who live there are, well, either currently serving or retired officers. I used to live there too, although in much reduced circumstances. I was renting a basement granny flat from a retired lieutenant commander and his wife. They were a lovely couple. They're probably dead by now, of course. Right. Anyway. Next stop, Portsmouth. Actually, no. Next stop, the Portsmouth Harbour Forts. Or what Microsft Flight Sim 2020 thinks the Portsmouth Harbour Forts look like. The island that you can see off in the distance over there, that appears to be home to Binstead Airfield, is the Isle of Wight, and that's the only part of Britain that was actually invaded by the French for a very short period of time during the Napoleonic Wars. They never got as far as Portsmouth, and there were a couple of reasons for that. One of those reasons are the Portsmouth Harbour Forts, which is what we're about to fly over, or at least what Flight Sim 2020 thinks the Portsmouth Harbour Forts look like, because don't forget, all of the data that you're seeing, all of the map data is generated from satellite imagery. And if you're looking down from orbit on one of those things, can you see it below me? Which is actually a circular fort rising out of the sea. You're probably not going to know what to make of it, and they didn't know what to make of it, so it's literally just a flat 2D texture pasted over the water, so that's a bit of a shame. But well, I would have been very surprised if they'd actually managed to make it look the way it does look, if the software had figured out what it was. There are certain areas in Microsft Flight Sim 2020 that have been handcrafted. A lot of the airports, and some of the more popular tourist destinations, like Manhattan for example, in New York. Portsmouth and Gosport, and Southsea here, not so much. Down there you can see the Pyramids, which is a sort of live music and comedy venue. There's a fort down there, and to my eternal shame, I have to confess, I don't actually know what it's called. But despite the odd error here and there, I really do think that the software has done an incredible job of extrapolating what things actually are and how they should look from the photogrammetric satellite data upon which this whole thing is based. And I'm prepared to forgive little things like Gosport High Street being covered in trees, because you have to expect that the software is going to fudge things here and there when it's not 100% sure what it is that it's actually looking at. On the whole, they've done an amazing job. We're flying over Southsea Common now. I don't know if you can just see the cenotaph below me. President Trump was there for a memorial service last year. He even managed to look vaguely interested throughout most of the ceremony, which I thought was jolly nice of him. We're now passing over Clarence Pier, which again, like most of Gosport and Southsea, has seen better days. Just taking a look back over Southsea Common, in the direction of Southsea Castle. I just remember what it was called. And that is Clarence Pier. It's a sort of very, very small amusement park with the world's smallest and shittiest roller coaster. Look, we're British, alright? That's the best we could manage on the resources available. That's just the story of our life. Right, we're about to get underway again and head over Gunwharf Quays in the direction of the Spinnaker Tower at Clarence Yard. Coming right up. This is Old Portsmouth. There's a round tower there that people often use to greet ships as they come back from foreign deployments, and there's some fantastic pubs down there as well. But down below us, you can clearly see the Spinnaker Tower, if I can remember which way the camera rotation works. Not that way. Yeah, there we go. That's Gunwharf Quays. This is a shopping and leisure complex. It's really nice, and there are some amazing restaurants here as well. One in particular, a Scottish chain called Loch Fyne. They do the most amazing seafood. They're very, very good. And it's the first place that I went to get something to eat at when the quarantine restrictions lifted, and it didn't disappoint. It was really weird with the waiters coming up to you wearing face masks, but hey, that's the world we live in now. This has, of course, visitors from the future. This has immediately dated this video for you. That's assuming that anybody's still alive. Things haven't gotten much, much worse in the future. And there's still a YouTube for you to watch this video on. That's Clarence Yard down there. And that's the tower I was talking about, where people, usually the families of the sailors, wave goodbye to ships going out on deployment and welcome them back when they come back in. Her Majesty's Naval Base Portsmouth and the historic dockyard are just ahead, right on the other side of the Spinnaker Tower, which was built for the year 2000 celebrations, which of course means that it wasn't ready anywhere near the year 2000. It's in the shape of a spinnaker sail, hence the name, the Spinnaker Tower. Oh, yes. Okay, we're going to have to pause here and take a closer look at HMS Warrior. At one point, the most powerful warship in the world. It's an ironclad. That thing down there covered in trees, yep, that's HMS Warrior. Again, when it comes to things like ships, the game isn't often sure exactly what it is that it's looking at. But that is an ironclad warship, chock full of 32-pounder guns, built in the year, I think, 1860. And on the far side of that is the historic dockyard. Open pretty much nearly every day of the year, and if you get the chance to visit Portsmouth, the historic dockyard is well worth a visit, if only to see HMS Victory, Lord Admiral Horatio Nelson's flagship at the Battle of the Nile and the Battle of Trafalgar, and the ship on which he died. In fact, there's even a brass plaque on the deck that says this is the spot where Nelson fell. Probably tripped over the brass plaque. But anyway, unfortunately, Microsft Flight Sim 2020 does an even worse job of the Victory than it did of HMS Warrior. That's the Victory there. Yeah. The oval building that you can see behind it contains the remains of the Mary Rose, the Tudor ship that sank on its maiden voyage in Portsmouth Harbour. And down there, in that dry dock, is HMS M33, which is a gunboat that was built in 1915 and saw service in the First World War. The historic dockyard is also the home of the Royal Navy Museum, the Royal Navy Archives. There used to be an amazing antique shop there where you could buy anything from deactivated MG42s to suits of armour. Sadly, that's now closed. And there's a whole host of other attractions, and that building right there, well, when I worked there, was known as Victory Building, and it was the home of the 2nd Sea Lord and Commander-in-Chief Naval Home Command. I'm not quite sure who works there now. It may be the 1st Sea Lord. Or Commander-in-Chief Fleet. I really don't know. Yeah, that's HMS Victory. Yeah, no, I don't think so. And now we're out of the historic dockyard, and we're in Her Majesty's Naval Base Portsmouth itself. And, you know, it hasn't done too bad a job on the Type 23 frigate that we can see there on the left, and the Type 45 destroyer that we're flying over right now. And up ahead is HMS Queen Elizabeth. Covered in trees, of course. But it's not bad. I mean, don't forget, it's generating all of this on the fly, taking its best guess as to what it is that it's actually looking at. Over there on the left, I think that's HMS Bristol. The only Type 82 destroyer ever built, which I think saw service in the Falklands and then was very quickly retired. We didn't build any more, and now it's a Sea Cadet ship. Just flying over the frigate sheds. This is the heart of the dockyard itself, and we're now approaching HMS Nelson, which is the barracks for the dockyard. And it's changed a lot since I lived and worked here. Let's pause it again as we approach Nelson Wardroom, which does look very, very good. That's pretty much exactly what the wardroom looks like, right there. Over here we've got the Unit Personnel Office, which is where I worked. The Soldier, Sailor, Airmen's Families Institute headquarters. This is new build junior rates accommodation. That's the senior rates accommodation and car park. This big square building that you can see in the centre there, that's the NAFI complex. Also the junior rates dining hall. There's a nightclub there. There's all kinds of shops and facilities. This is nothing compared to the kind of facilities that you expect to see in an American base. But, well, American bases tend to be built in the ass end of nowhere, so they pretty much have to have all of the facilities. This is right in the middle of Portsmouth. Literally right in the middle of Portsmouth. You go out of Nelson Main Gate, turn left, and you're in Portsmouth city centre 3 or 4 minutes later. There's the wardroom again. Beautiful old building. Used to have a friend who was a chef in there while I was living in HMS Nelson, and I really look forward to the days when he was responsible for cooking the officers' meals, because it meant I got their leftovers. At the time, we junior rates didn't live in any of those fancy apartment buildings where they all have individual rooms with Wi-Fi and internet connections. No, we lived in 2 horribly decrepit old tower blocks where we were packed in 6 to a room, 20 floors in each block, no working elevators. They were called Keppel Block and Samares Block. I lived in Keppel Block, which was... well, the elevators in Keppel worked some of the time, but the fire alarms in Samares Block didn't go off every night at 3 o'clock in the morning, causing the entire building to have to be evacuated. That happened every night in Keppel Block. Ah, fun times. Right, anyway, that's it for the naval base. But that's not the end of the naval facilities in and around Portsmouth. There's still more to see. Circling back over the naval base, we're now approaching Whale Island. Whale Island is where the first tank crews were trained during World War I, and they were trained here because the tanks were equipped with surplus naval 6-pounder guns, and the only people that knew how to operate them were the Naval Gunnery School, which was based at Whale Island. So Army tank crews were trained here in the First World War. There's so many things packed into Whale Island, as well as the Royal Naval Sailing Association, HMS Bristol, which we've already seen. There's also the Royal Navy Regulating School, which trains the Royal Navy's service policemen. You've got Navy Command Headquarters, but most people who visit Whale Island these days are coming here for one reason, and one reason only, and that's sea survival training. Well, okay, 2 reasons. Sea survival training and firefighting training. Oh, actually, also damage control training and first aid. Okay, anything that's likely to go wrong, you get trained for it here at Whale Island, at this bit here in the northern end. You've got the first aid school, you've got the gas chamber where they prove that your S10 respirator works properly. You've got HMS Havoc, which will actually, can we see it? Oh, we can. That grey thing down there, that's HMS Havoc. It's a fake ship that swings from side to side, and they pump it full of water and tell you to get in and, you know, make it not full of water. That's the damage control trainer. It's right next to the first aid school, but that building down there, and it even says firefighting training. Wow, that's pretty impressive. That is full of firefighting rigs. It's all perfectly safe, as long as you don't mind getting burned or choking on smoke. But that's where they teach you how to fight fires using the equipment available on board warships. Many unhappy memories of visiting Whale Island, but we're about to visit my favourite place in Portsmouth. This is Tipner Range. This is the Navy firing range with 100, 200 and 300 metre firing points. There's also a 20 metre pistol range over here. I used to love spending days on Tipner Range. Unusually for this place, there's no red flag flying. You can see the butts down at that end. That's where the business end of the rifle is pointed. And every single time a yacht goes past, the red flag goes up and you have to cease fire. And yachts go past Tipner Range all the time because of something that we're about to see as we approach Porchester, passing by Horsey Island on our right, which contains the Defence Diving School, where Royal Navy clearance divers are trained. Those are the guys that blow things up underwater. And we're just approaching Porchester Castle. There's been a castle on this site since the 3rd century AD, first built by the Romans, and then rebuilt by the Saxons, and then after 1066 rebuilt again by the Normans. And it still stands today. Well worth a visit as well. Passing over the Vosper Thornycraft yards. Somehow, despite government cutbacks, still in business, Vosper Thornycraft designed and built the Royal Navy's Type 21 frigates, some of which saw service and were sunk in the Falklands War. But the reason why Tipner Range is such a frustrating experience is because of what you're seeing straight up ahead. That's Porchester Marina. It's full of very expensive yachts, and the second the sun comes out, all of the yachties jump into their yachts and head out for a jolly, which involves sailing straight past Tipner Range, so the red flag goes up and I have to stop shooting things. And on bright sunny days like this, the yachties are constantly going out past Tipner Range. Seriously, you wait months to get a day on the range and you pray for rain. Because it's the only way to get any shooting done. We're now approaching Portsdown Hill. It's that white cliff face, which is a lot more impressive in reality, trust me. And on the top of Portsdown Hill are a number of things. One of which isn't actually represented here, which is kind of disappointing. I think those sort of warehouse structures that you can see are supposed to be the Defence Science and Technology Centre at Portsdown, and trust me, it looks nothing like that in reality. A lot of people, when they look up at the hill and they see it for the first time, think that there's a warship up there, because DST Portsdown specialises in, I don't know for sure because it's top secret, specialises in radar and electronic warfare equipment. So they've got a whole bunch of warship masts with radar and electronic warfare equipment on it. But it's just not here. What there is on the top of Portsdown Hill, as well as a whole bunch of extremely good pubs and burger vans, are a whole bunch of Napoleonic forts that are known as the Palmerston Follies, because they were commissioned and paid for on Lord Palmerston's watch, who was, I don't know if he was the Prime Minister or the Foreign, whatever, he was a bigwig during the Napoleonic Wars, when we were quite worried that France was going to invade. So they built the Portsmouth Harbour forts out to sea, although it was anticipated that, again, I'm not quite sure what that's supposed to be either. It might be the Churchillian pub. Anyway, it was anticipated that the harbour forts wouldn't hold a French invasion, so a whole bunch of forts were built on the top of Portsdown Hill, which basically encircles Portsmouth, to stop the French from getting any further inland. It cost a fortune, it almost bankrupted the government, and the French didn't invade. Which is why they're called Palmerston's Follies. I should probably look it up and find out who he really is, but can't be bothered. That's your homework for the day. Find out who Lord Palmerston actually was. All of this, of course, was a bustling hive of activity during World War II. Actually, I wonder if we can at least see the outlines of the forts. You know what, I'll circle back and take another look. That might be one of them down there. Again, it's difficult to say. None of this is physically handcrafted. Circle back around again. Oh, frame rate's dropping a little there. Over there, to the right-hand side of the screen, was Southwark House, which was Eisenhower's headquarters leading up to D-Day. That's where the plans for D-Day were drawn up and where D-Day was commanded. And all of those fields that you can see during World War II would have been covered in tents. Tents full of American soldiers getting ready for D-Day. There would have been a whole bunch of airfields covering the fields as well, all of which are gone now, of course. Let's see if I can spot the outline of any of these Napoleonic forts, because the forts themselves still stand today. In fact, one of them, Fort Widley, is still intact. And let's take a look down. I think we're about to see the outline of one of the forts. Yep, there you go. I used to play airsoft at Fort Widley, one of these forts. All of the firing galleries, the fortifications, the tunnels, they're all still intact. And in fact, one of the forts, Fort Nelson, which is further in the direction that we're going, is the home of the Royal Armoury's Artillery Museum, and is another amazing place to visit, particularly if you go on a Sunday, because every Sunday they wheel out one of the guns and they fire it off. And they have a pretty impressive collection of some seriously big guns at Fort Nelson as well. I'm pretty sure down below us now is DST Portsdown, even though in reality it looks nothing like that. And again, you can see the outlines of some of the fortifications. But I think what's happening here is that since we're not actually in an urban area, the game is just making its best guess. This is another one of the forts. Again, I don't know which one it is. In fact, that's Fort Nelson. That one right there was Fort Nelson. That's where the Royal Armoury's Artillery Museum is. Again, well worth a visit if you're in this neck of the woods. So, this has been, well, Leon Solent, Gosport, Southsea, Portsmouth, Porchester, basically everything that's left of the Royal Navy, which isn't a lot these days, you've pretty much seen today. I hope you've enjoyed it, because I've certainly had fun taking in the sights. There's another fort below us as well. I have no idea. I've lost track of... Is that... No, I don't know. I haven't got a clue. But you get the general idea. This place is covered in history. I've had a lot of fun showing you around. I hope you've enjoyed being shown around, because that's pretty much it for today. I'm going to be doing more of this in future. Taking you around places that I visited when I was in the Navy, showing you the sights, and maybe also taking in some of the more impressive things that are on display in Microsft Flight Sim 2020. And if you have any suggestions for something that you might like me to take a look at, like the D-Day beaches, for example, Pegasus Bridge over the Orne Canal, then by all means go ahead and make your suggestions in the comments. But that is it for today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.